Hey, Small Group Network, Kirsten here, and I have another blog post for you today that's called, Is Your Vision 2020 Yet? Because I know we're all thinking the same thing. 2020 is not how I envisioned. 2020 is looking very different than what I thought it would be. And yet, we're 9 months into the year and we still don't know what the remainder of 2020 is going to look like. But Proverbs 29:18 reminds us that without vision, the people perish. And so, how do we create vision for our small groups amidst uncertainty? Because Proverbs tells us vision is so important. And we know that our group leaders, they're looking to us for guidance, for direction, and for vision. So I thought today I would just share two things that have been helping me navigate uncharted territory. And the first is prayer, and the second is a term called kedging. Now, with prayer, we know that God sees all. We know God knows all. He is still on the throne leading today. He knows what's going to happen for the remainder of 2020. And so why would we not want to continue to seek Him in prayer so that we are able to have a better understanding of His vision? Because I often think that sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we're like, okay, we have to come up with something really fast and come up with it all on our own. When in reality, prayer is what guides us to the one who is leading the path. Prayer is what helps us put feet to the vision. Prayer helps us better understand God's will and God's plan, not our own. And so there are a couple of things that I have just been seeking the Lord and asking in prayer every single day. And the first question is, God, what do you want to do with this ministry? And the second question is, how can I be a part of it? Now, I promise you, if God's willing to give Noah specific cubit measurements to build an ark, He will give you a blueprint for how to build your small group ministry, for how to design it in this season. So we just have to keep seeking the Lord daily. And then the second thing is kedging. Now, if you are a boater, you're probably familiar with this term. But essentially, the Royal Navy's Seamanship Manual from 1904 talked about kedging as a way that they would help navigate these large ships in tight harbors and narrow places. And kedging is essentially where they would throw the anchor out ahead of the ship, and then they would pull the ship towards the anchor. Now, they had to do that repeatedly because really it only worked for about 600 feet. And as you can imagine, that is not a quick method. But they would do this repeatedly over and over and over because it was the only way to navigate challenging waters. And so similarly, in the crises we find ourselves in today, we are navigating challenging waters. So what would it look like to throw your anchor out ahead of you? I mean, kedging is really just another way to describe casting vision, casting a wider net. And so there are three questions that I want to ask you today. The first is, where do we need to get back to the basics in this season so that we are able to cast our anchor out ahead of us, and then your small groups are able to follow? The second question is, what do you absolutely know to be consistently true about God? Because that in and of itself is an anchor point. And then the third question is, what do you know to be consistently true about your small groups and your small group ministry? Because that can then help you form an anchor point that then gives the people something to grab a hold of. All of these are ways that we are looking for anchors. We are looking for vision that the Lord will help guide us and help us navigate in this uncharted territory. And I believe that through prayer and through kedging, even if it is only 600 feet at a time, that is what's going to help us navigate these challenging waters.